I decided to study abroad. Like, I've wanted to study abroad like all my life, since I was like and I've traveled a lot growing up, so it was always something that I was going to study abroad. It wasn't even almost like an option in my head. I ended up going to Madrid, Spain for a semester, the second semester of my sophomore year, so the spring semester. And because I was studying Spanish, it made sense, like language-wise, to continue with Spanish and kind of be immersed in the culture there. And just being that it was connected with SLU, it was going to be really easy transferring credits and everything else. But I had a wonderful experience, and I ended up actually staying. I was there for the spring semester and then for the summer. So I had very, very, very differing like experiences, very like night and day. Like once, yeah.
I decided to study abroad in the second semester of my sophomore year because I'm also studying international studies. So I knew I had to study abroad at some point. It was definitely something that I wanted to do. So I decided to study abroad in Cape Town, South Africa, and I did a non-SLU program. And I lived in Cape Town for 6 months and had a great time. And then I came back to SLU first semester of my junior year, and then I studied abroad again in Budapest, Hungary. And it was a very different experience, but also a very good experience.
And the reason why I wanted to study abroad, period, is because, you know, I remember, I don't know whose advice it was or what book I was reading, but I remember someone who I looked up to said, like, this was, like, the best, like, to study abroad is, like, one of the best experiences you can have in college. So, like, that's when I knew I wanted to do it. And, like, I was dead set on going to Spain. Or, like, going anywhere in Europe, whatsoever.
I went to a really large university. I had the opportunity to meet a lot of South Africans and a lot of people from Southern African countries, and really kind of see a different way that a university works and teaches classes and the way that the students engage with their university.
And a Burger King. I took a picture of that just because it said Viva España. So it kind of shows like they kind of resent all this Americanization a little bit in Spain. I kind of thought that was cool. I was like literally across the street from my house. If you notice this, you'll see like all American movies right here. Foster's, the American restaurant. American restaurant that we've never heard of in our entire life. But apparently it's been there since 1971.
See the differences between different groups based on race and socioeconomic class. Especially with a lot of white South Africans, I did see a lot of like consumerism. You see a lot more of people wearing brands. I don't know, it's like something that's like really important. And that was something that was really interesting about South Africa, is because I think it has the greatest socioeconomic divide of any country in the world. So I had the opportunity to do volunteer work and work with very poor South Africans, and also go to university with South Africans whose parents have millions of dollars. So it was all very interesting.
Halloween out there. Like they just started celebrating it. Dubliners. This is like the American restaurant right here. American bar. Like, if you want to meet
good food and stuff?
I never eaten inside there. I only got drinks. But if you want to meet Americans, you definitely go to Dubliners. Like, everyone in there speaks English. That's where all the Americans go.
Nice.
I mean, I only went there once or twice because, I don't know, I don't want to meet Americans. I didn't go to Spain to meet Americans. So, like, I only been there once or twice. But, like, yeah, if you want to watch, like, sports games in America, like NFL games or, like, basketball games, you go to Dubliners. Nice. And you can watch college football games.
My expectations before studying abroad in South Africa was that I would really integrate myself into the school and the community, and I would make lots of South African friends, and I wouldn't hang out with Americans. which I think is what most people think when they study abroad, but that's not necessarily what happened. I did become really good friends with my South African roommate, but at the same time I became really, really good friends with a lot of the Americans I studied abroad with, and I think that's kind of one of the untold lessons of study abroad is I think you can meet some of the most interesting Americans, of people with similar interests, like Americans who wanted to live in South Africa. And I mean, that's still a really great experience in and of itself, and I've had the opportunity to visit a lot of them in different parts of the United States. So initially I thought I would have tons of like international friends, and I made some, but it was easier to become closer with Americans. So and the same thing kind of happened in Hungary as well. I made some international friends, but probably built the closest relationships with the Americans that I traveled with.
Before studying abroad, I think I really thought I'd be making a lot more Spanish friends and not so much be with like the American students, because I just figured, oh, I can be with Americans here in St. Louis, like I don't need to be with Americans in Madrid. But quickly I found out like that's not how it ended up being. I think especially in SLU Madrid, with so many students from SLU filtering in semester after semester, it's really hard. From when I was speaking to different students that were permanent, like they're less, unless the student's there for at least a year, they're more hesitant to become friends with Americans, which I mean makes sense because you don't want to be making really close friendships and then losing them within and not knowing when you're going to see them again. So that was, I think, the biggest difference in what I expected before going and then what actually ended up happening.
That's the metro system. Cool shit. Like, you press a button and then like the doors open. So like I really like that a lot, actually. And the metro comes like on a slow day. It comes every 10 minutes. On a fast day, every 3. So like their metro system is probably the best I've ever been on in my entire life. Probably the best metro system in the world.
I went up to northern Portugal and got to see two big cities in northern Portugal. Was there for the craziest holiday. They go around in the streets, like all these people gather in the streets and they're like dancing, grilling of sardines, music all over. It's a huge party. And then the weirdest thing though is people walk around with hammers, like plastic blown up hammers. And they like hit random people on the head. It's so weird. And then there are these garlic flowers. I don't really know what they're called, but they're these long stems with like a flower that smells like garlic, and they stick it into each other's noses. And like if you're talking and it gets stuck, it's the worst. But that was like the oddest holiday I've ever experienced in my life. I was like, I can't hit people with a hammer, but it was so much fun.
Like I remember one time I was at the metro station and I was like ordering a train ticket, and I was like, I was speaking in like I said like one trip instead of one viajos, whatever, and like one of the kids saw me say that, and like he was like looking, he was like, oh, like he's an American, but he said it in Spanish or whatever, and then he like looked at me and was just like, yo, what's up? Like for one example is like I was playing pool with one of my friends or whatever, and he had a shirt that had blackface on it, and I made a point not to say anything to him about it, because like I didn't want to start anything, but then he came up to me and was like, Thomas, do you like my shirt? It's blackface, so I just told him, I was like, no, your shirt is kind of racist, kind of offensive. And like his response was like, no, Thomas, this is jazz. Like this is jazz culture, this is not racist. This had nothing to do with race. Then I had to try to point out like where this blackface comes from, why is his like lips so big, and why he has white hands, and why this shirt is like black.
So he never understood that. He just understood that as being jazz culture and not seeing none of the struggling behind it and none of the pioneers of,
it's like
that,
it's
what
almost
do they call it, the minstrel shows?
Yeah, the minstrel shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like he knew the jazz part about it, but he didn't know the actual deeper history about blackface. And and what it symbolizes to like black people in America.
Language. So, for example, they do not dub shows over in English. They have them all. They have them. No, wait. What's the word? They don't put Hungarian subtitles. Instead, they get Hungarian actors to dub over all these TV shows in Hungarian. And a lot of Hungarians don't really learn English very well, especially the older generation, because they would have had to learn Russian as a second language. So it was harder to really engage in Hungarian society, especially outside of Budapest, because of the strong language barrier.
I was teaching English to a little girl, and they traveled for a time. So I guess during that period of time, I like fit into their family, and like that was when I felt like maybe more Spanish. But I don't think I ever like felt like I didn't fit in. But it wasn't as open, I guess, to as that I had anticipated from my expectations. In terms of being an American, I think the one thing that's frustrating when you study abroad is seeing all the dumb Americans, because there are plenty out there, and like that's, and you know, like it's always like that one or two people, like people see, and that's how they get the bad impressions of Americans, which I think is really sad. So I think just, you know, like trying to represent your culture as best as you can is the way to go when you're studying abroad. Because I mean, I'm proud to be an American. I think it's like, and it's good for people to see the good side of Americans, as well as, you know, not all the like ditzy Americans that you see on TV and all those shows, because that's what's out there.